In my state of North Carolina, ICE and CBP descended on cities, snatching up people based on the color of their skin or because of where they worked, frequently U.S. citizens.
Republicans worry about Europe while never has freedom of speech been more under threat, maybe since the Alien and Sedition Act. But the threat isn't from Brussels. It's from inside the White House. Mass paramilitary forces executing citizens. Then, NC Republican Party to ProPublica. We have connections with Trump. Drop this story. Ross, pull out your Constitution. Use every First Amendment right. Rule of law is under siege.
I find it ironic that my Republican colleagues are spending this committee's time talking about an imagined threat of Europe to America's freedom of speech and innovation. Never has freedom of speech in this country been more under threat, maybe since the Alien and Sedition Act. But the threat isn't coming from Brussels. It's coming from inside the White House and the president's cabinet. We're seeing this administration send mass roving paramilitary forces to cities whose leaders have stood up to the president. We're seeing these agents use the excuse of immigration enforcement to execute American citizens in the street for exercising their freedom of speech and their freedom of assembly. And if you're executed without a trial, don't worry. The administration's chief propagandist will make up the reason why you deserved it 10 minutes after the news breaks. Probably because you committed domestic terrorism by filming them. Even Saturday Night Live had a good time with that last weekend. Or helping a woman up who had been pushed to the ground. In my state of North Carolina, ICE and CBP descended on cities, snatching up people based on the color of their skin or because of where they worked, frequently U.S. citizens. And it's not just Republicans in the federal executive branch that are going after freedom of speech. When ProPublica was researching a story on how Paul Newby, the Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court, politicized a once impartial and respected institution, the spokesman for the North Carolina Republican Party told ProPublica that, quote, "I'm sure you're aware of our connections with the Trump administration, and I'm sure they would be interested in this matter, and I would strongly suggest you dropping this story." The Trump administration called Renee Good and Alex Preddy agitators and domestic terrorists. They've used rubber bullets, real bullets, tear gas, and military equipment against peaceful protesters. The administration is calling everyday Minnesotans who record ICE and CBP officers agitators. Mr. Mayel, does recording immigration enforcement agents make someone an agitator?
You have a First Amendment right to record and video law enforcement.
Does delivering meals to neighbors too scared to leave their home make someone an agitator?
Delivering meals is not unlawful activity.
Does standing outside a school pickup line to make sure your child's friend doesn't get abducted make someone a domestic terrorist?
My understanding of the definition of domestic terrorism does not match any of what we have seen.
Yet all of this is happening in your state.
Our state is under siege in a way that we have not seen, certainly not in my lifetime, and free speech is under threat in a way that, in the most significant way that we have seen in our lifetime, and the rule of law is under siege.
Well, I appreciate your testimony today. I appreciate what you're doing during this very difficult time to protect Americans' right to free speech. Every time I do a town hall and people ask me what they can do, I remind them that in this country we have the First Amendment. And the only way we can change things is to use every single right in the First Amendment. So pull out your Constitution and pick what you're going to do, whether it's praying, speaking, petitioning the government for redress of grievance. We have all those rights in this country. And we should be proud of our citizens for standing up against their government when their rights are being infringed. Mr. Chairman or Madam Chairwoman, I didn't notice. Thank you. I have a unanimous consent request. It's from the San Antonio Express News, January 25th, 2026. Pete Hegseth censures Mark Kelly for saying the things he himself said.
So ordered.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Congresswoman Deborah Ross lays out a sweeping indictment of how free speech in America is being attacked on multiple fronts by the Trump administration and Republican officials. While the committee devotes its time to hearings about European regulations, Ross documents a pattern of escalating assaults on press freedom, the right to protest, and the rule of law, not by foreign governments, but by the White House, federal agents, and state political actors who openly threaten journalists and citizens with retaliation. Ross opens with cutting irony. I find it ironic that my Republican colleagues are spending this committee's time talking about an imagined threat of Europe to America's freedom of speech. Never has freedom of speech in this country been more under threat, maybe since the Alien and Sedition Act. But the threat isn't coming from Brussels. It's coming from inside the White House and the president's cabinet. The historical reference is intentional. The Alien and Sedition Acts criminalized criticism of the government and are remembered as one of the darkest moments in American civil liberties. By invoking them, Ross is arguing that the current moment represents a comparable danger, a level of pressure on the First Amendment not seen in more than 2 centuries. She then details what that danger looks like in practice. According to Ross, federal forces are being deployed into cities whose leaders have challenged the president, operating in ways that blur the line between law enforcement and political intimidation. She describes how immigration enforcement is being used as a pretext for aggressive actions against people engaged in protected speech and assembly, and how, when Americans are injured or killed, administration-aligned voices move quickly to justify the violence by smearing the victims as extremists or criminals. Ross brings the issue home to North Carolina, describing ICE and CBP operations that she says have resulted in people being detained based on appearance, workplace, or neighborhood, including U.S. citizens. The implication is that enforcement has shifted from lawful targeting to broad fear-driven sweeps that undermine basic constitutional protections. One of the most chilling moments involves direct political intimidation of the press. Ross recounts how, when ProPublica was investigating allegations that the Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court had politicized a traditionally impartial institution, a spokesman for the North Carolina Republican Party warned the outlet that party leaders had connections to the Trump administration and strongly suggested that ProPublica drop the story. The message was unmistakable. Continue reporting, and political power will be used against you. This is not subtle pressure. It is an explicit threat designed to chill investigative journalism. Ross presents it as evidence that the assault on free expression is not accidental or isolated, but coordinated across levels of government and party structures. She connects that political intimidation to the treatment of protesters and ordinary citizens. Ross notes that people who record immigration agents, assist neighbors, or simply stand nearby during enforcement actions are increasingly labeled agitators or even domestic terrorists. Through a series of questions, she exposes the absurdity of those claims, confirming that recording law enforcement, delivering food to frightened neighbors, or ensuring children get home safely are all lawful, constitutionally protected activities. The broader picture that emerges is one of a state under strain, where fear is being used as a governing tool. Ross highlights how communities are being conditioned to see basic civic engagement as suspicious, and how ordinary acts of solidarity are being reframed as threats. She closes by urging Americans to exercise, not surrender, their constitutional rights. Whether through speech, protest, petitioning the government, or peaceful assembly, Ross argues that the only way to push back against the erosion of civil liberties is to actively use the freedoms the Constitution guarantees.